Hello everyone, and welcome to the channel for another Escape From Tarkov video. This time with yet another version of my level 2 trader's weapon build guide with some new options from the latest patch mixed in with some old classics and builds that just seem to work for me in this wipe, so I'm passing them on to you. I'm a bit late to the party on this one, but it's been a busy summer, so here it is, better late than never. Some interesting changes to ammo stats and availability during this patch have changed up a few things, most notably with the RFB no longer having M80 at level 2 and PP ammo being buffed, so 545 actually has a good ammo for the early game now. I'm going to start this video off with a look at some of the more classic level 2 trader builds, and then I have some simple mods for pre-built 5.56 guns like the SCAR and MDR, some rat style budget weapon choices, and a bit of a grab bag of other stuff at the end. To get things started, we've got the classic, tried and true AK build for level 2 traders that comes up every wipe. It's always been a solid choice, it's cheap, and it comes back through insurance. The build is basically the same as always, but the main difference in this patch is that 545 PP ammo is actually pretty good now, meaning 545 has a fairly cheap, reliable to acquire round that can compete with 7.62 PS ammo. With that in mind, I'll begin this with a 545 build on an AK-74N bought from Proper, starting off with the Zenit DTK1 compensator as the muzzle device to get you extra recoil control for a really good price. Next up, you want to go for the CAA RS47 handguard for the stats and the attachment rails, and then my choice of grip right up until level 3 traders is usually the RK4 from Skier, which just has the best stats for the price. For your tactical device, there's a lot of flashlights available at lower levels now, but I've just been running the cheap Balder Pro O-Light from Skier level 2. It's only 9,000 rubles, and if all you need is a light or a laser, it's definitely good enough. For a sight mount, you go with the Bastion dust cover, and then you can mount your choice of optic, whether that's a cheap Cobra sight or a more expensive EOTech holo sight like I have on this build. Next up, Skier level 2 now sells this Tango Down AK grip in the current patch, which gets you a pretty solid plus 12 ergonomics, so if you want some extra ergonomics, slap that one on here. Finally, you definitely want to add the GP25 recoil pad from Proper level 2 for that easy recoil bonus, and if you want some extra ergonomics, you can also add the RP1 charging handle from Skier. When this is all set up on the AK-74N, it ends up with 62 recoil and about 56 ergonomics for a total cost of 55,000 rubles in extra parts plus the cost of your weapon. If you want to set this up on any AKM style rifle, you can do the exact same build, but you'll need to add the TT AKM muzzle adapter sold by Skier level 1. This same build will also work on basically any AK in the game except for the AKS-74U, so anything you find in a crate or loot off a player or scav should be able to use this same build. Next up for this video, I have one of my personal favorite early wipe setups because it lets me feel like a Chad without spending Chad money, building an M4A1 basically out of scrap parts and refurbished components. The two stumbling points for this build are that you require mechanic level 2 to really make it work properly, and 5.56 doesn't really have amazing ammo early on. That being said, I like running it with M855, and you can always use an ADAR for this build and keep it semi-auto if you don't have mechanic level 2. The first step for this build is to actually acquire an ADAR, preferably in raid off a dead scav or off of the flea market at half durability for a really cheap price. Once you get the ADAR, you want to pull off the upper receiver, the 406mm barrel, and the charging handle, and then just sell the rest back to mechanic. After this, you have two choices. Skier level 1 will sell you an ADAR receiver for about 6,000 rubles, which will repair your durability all the way. Alternatively, mechanic level 2 sells you an M4A1 receiver for about 20,000 rubles, and this will repair your gun as well and give you full auto, turning it into an M4. Once this is done, you go and buy an MK12 gas block from Peacekeeper, as well as the carbine buffer tube, and then you start adding parts. First up, for the muzzle, I like to go with the KAC QD compensator and an NT4 suppressor, giving you good recoil for the price and a pretty solid suppressor. For the handguard, you have two options. First, you can go with the barter trade for the Daniel defense rail at Peacekeeper level 1 for an emergency water ration. Your other option is the MOE SL handguard from Skier, which is pretty good, but it requires M-lock rails, so if you don't have mechanic level 2, you won't be able to add any other parts to it. For my tactical attachments, I have the same budget combo from the AK, an RK4 grip, and the O-Light flashlight just to keep it simple. For the stock, I find the best option early on is the Chris DS150 stock from Peacekeeper level 2, with honestly competitive stats for its cheap price. Finally, you need a sight. For me, I like to go with the 5.53 holo sight from Peacekeeper, and then a pistol grip to finish it off. You can buy the default A2 pistol grip from Peacekeeper, or the tan ECS grip from Skier. both have pretty much identical stats. When this is all put together, you'll end up with 59 recoil and about 35 ergonomics depending on which handguard you choose. The price does depend on how you get the base ADAR for the build. Ideally you get it for free or for under 20,000 rubles on the flea market. And it also depends on whether you go full auto or keep it semi-auto with the ADAR receiver. You'll be adding about 80 to 90,000 rubles in parts onto this thing either way, but if you get the ADAR for free or cheap, the overall price really isn't that bad. Next up, we have maybe the simplest build of all the level 2 options, but also maybe the most effective, the UMP45 submachine gun. This thing is still alive and kicking, sort of dominating the playing field before everyone gets access to armor that can stop its ammo. The UMP is just kind of a beast with how much damage the ammo does, combined with how easy it is to shoot in full auto, making it truly a nightmare to come up against sometimes. The match FMJ ammo is really cheap and easy to get, and the build is really simple but devilishly effective. All you need to get this started is to buy an UMP from Peacekeeper, and it already has all of the mounts right on it from the store. To start off, you'll add the RK4 grip and a flashlight of some kind just to add stats and utility, and then you need a sight. I really like the 5.53 hollow sight on the UMP, but it works with cheap options as well, like the Cobra sight. Finally, the last choice for this build is whether or not you want a suppressor on this bad boy. If you want to run budget, ditch the suppressor for sure, but if you want to stay quiet and you have the money to spend, the OEM suppressor is sold at Peacekeeper level 2, and it goes right onto the default barrel. Suppressed, this build has 37 recoil, and loud, it gets about 45, so either way, it's not a very jumpy gun. The suppressor does add about 50,000 rubles onto the price tag, so make up your own mind about that one because it does work really good loud or quiet. In this current patch, we have a new entry in the level 2 trader builds, the newly added SAG-545 semi-auto AK, which is kind of a neat addition, but I think falls into the camp of being a fun gun for people who want to try something new, but maybe not a good universal choice for the average player. The SAG is semi-auto and shoots 5.45. So it's sort of like the ADAR, but it doesn't have access to as many good attachments to help get stats. That being said, it has phenomenal ergonomics and accuracy, so it is kind of a neat gun as a mid-range DMR. For the muzzle, it can take most of the standard 5.45 stuff, so for a cheap setup, you can just go with the DTK1 compensator, or you can look on the market for a 5.45 suppressor and add that if you want to be quiet. For the handguard, you will need M-lock rails to add attachments, which does kind of limit modding this until you get mechanic level 2, unfortunately. After that, I once again would go with the RK4 grip and some kind of light and laser. The SAG has a rail dust cover, so you can add basically any scope onto it right from stock. For this setup, I have a Monstrum 2x scope from Jaeger, but if you find a 4x out in a crate or something like that, it works quite well on the SAG. Finally, you can swap out the stock, and I would just go with the Chris DS150 stock for the best overall stats at level 2 traders. This build will end up at 60 recoil with this setup and a pretty high 76 ergonomics if you run it with the compensator, so it's a cool DMR type setup for longer range shooting, limited only really by the ammo it fires. The high initial cost of about 70,000 rubles from Skier, plus about 60,000 rubles in extra parts to get it up and running, does make it kind of awkward as a budget leveling build, so I don't really know what my final opinion on this thing is yet, to be honest. Next up, we have to take a look at the RFB, which was, until this patch, kind of the king of the level 2 trader builds, but has unfortunately fallen from grace a bit after M80 ammo was moved up to Peacekeeper level 3. The RFB is basically the first real build that gets you into 7.62x51 ammo. It's pretty cheap, it's easy to mod, and with M80, it absolutely destroyed all armor available at these lower levels. Now being limited to TCW SP ammo, it's still got some power, but it's not cutting down every single player in 2 shots anymore. For the 50,000 ruble entry price, I think the RFB is still worth it, but just remember that you don't have M80 until level 3 anymore, so those headshots are more important than ever. For the basic level 2 traders build, all you can really add is a grip and a sight, so bust out the classic RK4 grip, and that's half the battle. For the sight, you can use a simple red dot, you can get the 2x from Jaeger, the Burris 4x scope from Jaeger if you have it unlocked after doing the quest, or use something off the market or found in raid, just go with whatever you like. This build can go from as low as 70,000 rubles total up to about 100,000 rubles if you buy a bigger scope on the market. The recoil is quite high, but the ergonomics is decent, so if you like heavy hitting builds, this one will work for you. To finish off this video, I just wanted to kind of quickly run through some builds that I usually don't pay much attention to early on, just to give you some more options for cool or offbeat stuff to run once you hit level 2 traders. First up, we got the suppressed PP19, a personal favorite of mine. You can get the Vitiaz suppressor on the market for an insanely low price most of the time, so I always use that to suppress this thing. Next, swap the handguard for the cheap AK100 handguard from Proper, and then add the RK4 grip and a light or laser of your choice. Next, I go for a Cobra sight on the dovetail mount, and you can also add the sight shade for some extra ergonomics if you want. Finally, just slap a GP25 recoil pad onto the stock, and this simple SMG build is done and ready for use. Next up, we have the MP5 SD, available after completing Gunsmith Part 3 for Mechanic and sold by Peacekeeper Level 2 for about $500. The MP5 SD is a bit expensive for the initial gun, but it's whisper quiet, it shoots really fast, and it's great for close quarters fights. The build is really simple. You just add an MFI HK mount so you can fit a sight, and then get a red dot or a hollow sight like the EOTech for your optic. Next, get the B&T tri-rail from Peacekeeper, and then you can add a cheap flashlight or a laser, and that's it. This build has almost no attachments, but it ends up with 29 recoil and 57 ergonomics, making it pretty easy to hit accurate sprays with some practice. Lastly, for the SMGs, I personally have a real love affair with the Keter B from Proper Level 2. This thing costs 36,000 rubles total, it comes with a suppressor, and it fires really fast, so with pretty much any ammo type, it is amazing for getting leg meta kills. This gun's not for everyone, and it's not for every situation, but if you need a cheap way to dispense lead and not make much noise, the Keter will provide. It's also a great sidearm to pair with a sniper. Next up, I have a pair of almost identical builds for the Scar L and MDR, which aren't really good to buy from traders early on, but can be found in weapon crates and on dead rogues on Lighthouse, so honestly they can pop up pretty early for you if you get lucky. I would say that these two are much better options at the level 2 traders compared to the G36. You can technically buy the G36, but you can't really do anything with it early on, so I honestly would skip that until level 3 traders. First up, both of these rifles can use the KAC QD compensator and the NT4 suppressor, so this is a cheap and easy way to get better recoil and be quieter with your shots. For the Scar, you can add a foregrip and flashlight onto the default rails, so you can just get the RK4 grip and the cheap O-Light flashlight I keep talking about, add them on, and be done with it. For the MDR though, you need to get M-Lock rails from Mechanic before adding these parts, so it's tough to do any modding before level 20 unless you use the barter trades for these things at Mechanic level 1. Finally, both of these rifles have top rails for sights, so grab a hollow sight or whatever you prefer, add it on, and these builds are done. Overall, the MDR has much better stats in a basic build compared to the Scar, but the Scar is easier to mod. Both of them perform quite similar though, so it's not a huge difference. Finally, I have one more thing to mention before I let you go, the SKS. It's not normally looked at as a gun to use past like level 10, but honestly it ain't that bad and nobody ever picks it up, so it's always coming back through insurance. My simple SKS starts off with the OP SKS from Jaeger, and then you add the weapon tuning thread adapter and a DTK1 compensator for better recoil. You can also just put a hexagon SKS suppressor on this thing as well if you want to be quiet. Next, I add a SOCOM rail from Jaeger and the O-Light flashlight for some cheap utility. Finally, I slap a PSO 4x scope on there and it's all good to go, a fully functional 4x scope rifle for only about 60,000 rubles total. Another option is to do the barter trade for the Tapco SKS using one screwdriver and a GP coin at Mechanic level 2. Then you can add the same muzzle brake, but also an RK4 grip for extra stats, and you can swap that stock out for the Chris DS150 and get even better recoil. The SKS is not perfect, but it's cheap and it fires great ammo, and sometimes that's all you need out there in Tarkov. Well, that kind of covers it for my level 2 trader build suggestions. There's some new fancy toys, but the old classics are honestly still some of the best. I hope these builds help you out, and let me know what you think down in the comments. Did I miss anything? And what's been your favorite setup to run so far this wipe? Thanks for checking out the video. I've got links to my Twitch stream, Discord server, and Patreon page down below for anyone interested. And until next time, stay safe in Tarkov City.